I'm Dominic Bray, one of the stewards of the Southport Circuit. I'm delighted to be introducing this short video on the Mission and Ministry Review recently held at Leyland Road Church. I'm speaking as someone who initially was asked to be a helpful observer, then became a facilitator, and then summariser. So I can, I think, commend this review to Leyland Road and recommend it to the circuit and beyond, not as someone whose baby it is, but as someone who has come to see its value. For those who don't know, the review process was written by the Reverend Rachel Day, the former Mission and Evangelism Facilitator of the Liverpool District. Briefly, it involves 4 areas of inquiry, followed by reflection and an exploration of what further steps might be. Broadly, the 4 areas of inquiry covered were the story of Leyland Road, the story of the local community, what's going on in Leyland Road now, and how its current members see Leyland Road. I'll be introducing the members of Leyland Road leadership team who led each of these areas of inquiry. I'd like to introduce Chris, who led the research into the history of Leyland Road Church.
Hello, my name's Chris Hall. I'm the senior steward at Leyland Road Methodist Church, and as part of the review I was asked to do the historical side of our church. Leyland Road Church was erected in 1878 and was completed in 1880. The money for the building of this church was paid for by the congregation of Mornington Road Methodist Church as a chapel of ease for their already huge congregation. And the anticipated demand of people going to church in an area that was all new build. At the time, the whole of this area was being built. The capacity of Mornington Road was 900, and it was built circa 1861 and demolished in 1965. Leyland Road capacity originally was for 700, but the membership never grew much over 300. Originally, there were 2 circuits: Mornington Road with Blowick, which is now Victoria, South Bank, and Leyland Road. The second circuit being Trinity and other churches. The membership at the first service was 20 people. The Sunday school rooms and chapel keeper's house opened in 1891-1892. The cost of building this church was £12,767, 1,400 for the manse and £4,000 for the schoolrooms. Most of the money being raised by fundraising events and help from Mornington Road. Originally, there were no collections. The finance was received through pew rents, and to rent a pew was £1 per annum. If you work it out, the equivalent price today, in order to run our church for Sundays, for Sunday use only, would be £1,200 per annum, and people would be expected to pay around £23 a week. The first congregation were described as peculiar, The reason for this, I could not find out. I can only assume that perhaps they had the Holy Spirit. Message given at the opening service was, God will give you his blessing if you are worthy of it. And at the time, the ministerial stipends were described as the most generous in Southport from elsewhere. As I went through things out of the archives, I found leaflets and booklets, sales of work, for sales of work and other events. And nowhere could I find any biblical quotes. Poetry, quotes from Shakespeare, the odd line from a hymn, but nothing biblical. Many ministers from Mornington Road Methodist Church, once they'd finished their tenure there, were elevated to be president of the Methodist Conference. And indeed, our first minister, Thomas Allen, whom there is a picture of, was also president of the conference after finishing his time here. Mornington Road Church was considered the finest church in Methodism, and laymen thought to have lofty ideals and be distinguished in their service. I didn't research the war years, except that it had a severe toll on the fabric, with soldiers being billeted in the schoolrooms, and presumably they had use of the church in the week. And when they finally went, the whole place needed redecorating from top to bottom. I look for details of house classes, and we know that house classes have always existed, but there's no details of leaders or anything that I could find. I'm sure they happened. Sunday school has always been a strong thing at Leyland Road. There's always been a lot of children, hence the building of the schoolrooms in the first place. And it's been very strong until, like everywhere else, it's dropped off in recent years. Social life was a big draw here. For the members of the church, in the 20s, we had a sports ground where football, hockey, cricket teams played, and they're quoted as having over 120 members. There was snooker and drama groups, not to mention the Young Wives Fellowship and other meetings. Pastoral work has always been important. In the past, it was, well, so it would seem, often less about caring as giving religious guidance. Today, we are concerned about giving assistance to our members and non-members, praying for them and offering practical help and assistance to help meet their needs. We have an organisation called CAP, which is Christians Against Poverty, and we have dedicated members offering assistance to anyone who needs help with employment, with addiction, and perhaps when they get into problems with finance. We today use our premises for lettings to help with the funds, because it costs today, every year, as much as it did to build the church in the first place. These groups vary. Some are non-Christian groups, some are Christian groups, but often in some groups they are assisted by people from the church, and we are able to give the gospel message through what we do in our everyday life. It is evident that God has always blessed Leyland Road. It has always had God's blessing. It was seen that when things become difficult, the presence of the Holy Spirit has been with us strongly. The events described in the booklet, When the Tide Came In, which happened in 1975 and only published in the last 2 years or so, bear testimony to this. In my time here, in the past 20 years, I have discovered that the Lord is enabling a change in His church, and we have to listen and pray in order to do His bidding. Thank you.
Now, I'd like to introduce Andrea, who co-led the research into the community, what its needs are, what's already being done well, and what opportunities for ministry there might be, and so forth.
Hello, my name's Andrea, and I've been part of a small team that includes Neil and Raj, looking at the local community. We've used secondary, mainly government data to do our research, as well as some primary data gathered through our local ward councillors. We would have liked to have met personally and had the opportunity to meet with individuals and groups, but unfortunately COVID restrictions prevented that. I'm going to start with some demographic information. So Southport has a population of approximately 95,000 people and consists of 7 wards. Here at Leyland Road we sit in Cambridge Ward, and that adjoins Dukes and Norwood wards. These 3 wards are the focus of our research. The population is ageing, and the 65 and 85 plus age brackets are projected to rise. A quarter of the entire population in Sefton is age 65 plus. But here in Dukes Ward and Cambridge Ward, we buck that trend, and we're already running at over 30%. Ethnicity, 92% of folk describe themselves as white British. The other 80% is made up of many ethnic minority groups, but we noted that there's a healthy Eastern European group as well. In terms of health, 80% of people describe themselves as being in good health or jolly good health. The hospital standard admission rate here, the ratios are above the national average for the likes of coronary heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, stroke and mental health. Deprivation. Central Southport is in the top 20% of deprived areas in this country. Cambridge, Dukes and Norwood wards have the highest benefits claimants in Southport. Religion. Approximately 70,000 people identify as being Christian. Almost 20,000 say they have no religion, and approximately 5,000 refuse to comment. Crime. We hone this research to look at very closely to Leyland Road, and this consists of antisocial behaviour, violent and sexual crimes against the person, vehicle crime, drug offences, burglary and various thefts. Sefton Council here have a local plan that's running through until the year 2030. This identifies Southport and its town centre as a priority for regeneration. There's a great need for additional affordable housing in Southport. And throughout this borough, Southport is the main focus of tourism. We looked at activities that are available for people across this town, and we looked at that in various age ranges. So I'm going to start with our retirees. They are so well served by the University of the Third Age, U3A, with over some 80 activities that one can join in with. And nearly a quarter of those operate out of our local churches in Southport. Adults of all ages can do just about any type of sport you'd like. So tennis, sailing, cricket and croquet on the table there. Wonderful. Our children have lots of groups that they can join in with, performing arts, again sports and arts and crafts. Our youth can get involved in cadet roles in the armed forces, for example, some scouting, girl guiding, and there's a Christian organisation called Mission Europe. And we have mother and toddlers groups that feature in most of our churches in Southport. We have dedicated help and support groups too, and these include Rethink, the Hesketh Centre, Samaritans, the Multiple Sclerosis Society, Galloway's, Alzheimer's and Macmillan, just to mention a few. We were asked to identify the unmet needs of the community, and across the 3 wards, those again being Cambridge, Dukes and Norwood, we found some statistics that really stood out for us. When I say stood out, we noticed that these were not only above the Sefton average, they were much higher than the Sefton average, almost 2 to 3 times higher. And they were for alcohol misuse, intentional self-harm, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. That concludes the secondary data that we gathered. I'm now going to go on and feed back to you with the primary data that we gathered from our local ward councillors. And this is in regard to the problems, the concerns and the needs of the local community, the stuff that the local councillors are dealing with day in and day out. So this is what they told us. Poverty and wealth coexist. That's poverty and wealth coexisting across all 3 wards. Housing is a combination of family homes, neighbouring homes of multiple occupancy. There wasn't enough space, outdoor space in recent months for those living without a garden to ease the impact of lockdown. Isolation and loneliness for our old people is really a concern. Those caring for family members, say for example with dementia, are often also isolated and the silent sufferers of loneliness. There's been a dramatic increase in the use of food banks. Employment for our young people is limited and often low paid. And generally, unemployment will continue to rise, particularly in the retail and hospitality trade due to COVID. Domestic violence has increased. Mental health issues continue to rise. Drug problems exist here, and some of the landlords allow properties to be used as drug dens. Our councillors see a need for the church to get involved in all of this and be part of this local community, and they fed back to us with 3 suggestions. So suggestion 1 was, please can we start a credit union to help people getting into debt using high interest loan companies. Suggestion number 2, well, they said to us, your baby boogies group and your toddler group are great, but please can you open them 12 months of the year, because often the mums who are accessing this service have very little or no family support around them. And the final suggestion was a children's clothing bank would be really useful. My question to you is, what are the priorities for us at Leyland Road to be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ in this local community? Please pray about this and join in a conversation on the 15th of October to further the Lord's work in the heart of the local community. Thank you for listening. God bless.
Now I'd like to introduce David, who co-led the research into what activities the church is already involved with.
Hello and welcome to part 4 of the Church Review, which is called What is the Continuing Story in and Through this Church? In other words, what is the position of our church today? The first area we looked at were where members live in relation to the church. 50% of our membership live within half a mile of the church. 26% live within 1 mile and 24% beyond 1 mile. There's been little change in this pattern over the years. Then we looked at the churches that members passed en route to Leyland Road. 9 people passed Cornerstone, 5 people passed Victoria, and a further 9 people passed Lord Street West and St. Peter and Paul with Wesley. We then looked at the numbers of those who have a connection with worship at Leyland Road. The current total of members is 105 and adherents 38. This means that we've seen a fall in membership over the last 10 years of 2.1% on average every year. But more significantly, with a fall of membership over the last 3 years of 4%. We also made an estimated age profile of our membership. 44% over 70 years of age, 42% over 50 years of age, 10% under 50 years of age, and approximately 4% live in care homes. It's interesting to note that these figures mirror the age profile of the community where the church is situated. There's been a drop in average attendance on Sunday morning worship from 108 adults in 2010 to 80 adults in 2019, and an even greater drop in the number of children attending. We next looked at the references to areas of the church life in church council minutes. These broke down as worship and prayer, 18%, mission, service and evangelism, 23%, pastoral care, 4%, learning, which is Bible study groups or training courses, 8%, children and young people, 14%, property, 1%, finance, 22%, and other, 10%. It's no surprise that most of the church council time, as opposed to occasions, is spent on church management matters, and this is a fundamental function of the church council. But most references are to do with reports, but not in-depth discussion of vision, worship, mission, etc. What stands out as well is the number of evangelism initiatives we've started but now discontinued. For example, Who Let the Dogs Out? Imagine Project, Messy Church, 4 O'Clock Church, Metal, Youth Band, etc. But we have started other initiatives over the last few years, and these were still going strong until the COVID-19 restrictions. When we looked at finances, there's an obvious drop coinciding with the drop in membership, and in real terms because of inflation. For the year 2010-2011, when there were 131 members, the contributions per member was £1,112 per annum. But in 2019-20, the number of members was 105, and contributions per member was 1,116. So there's only a difference of 4% in the actual total per annum. But allowing for inflation, say about 3%, the drop in giving is about £300 per member. The church had many varied activities pre-COVID-19. A list of what currently goes on in the name of the church, on and off the church premises, include altitude, men's breakfast, baby boogies, luncheon club, badminton club on a Monday, mate watchers, church open for tea and toast, power station, crazy for craft, prayer meetings, ladies badminton group, toddler club and friends together group, women's fellowship and group fellowship. The church is involved with several social concerns, which mainly revolve around CAP with their Fresh Start scheme and the Job Club, which meet here regularly pre-COVID-19. And the church is also open on Monday mornings to the community, whoever wants to join us. This is just generally for coffee and toast. Several community groups meet on the premises and hire space from the church. They are the Art Group Schools, Birkdale Trust for Hearing Impaired, Flu Jabs, TTC, Gideons, U3A, Linda Teal, who's a valuer, and the ukulele group, which is part of the U3A. This obviously produces an income for us, but it is an area that we feel we could expand upon. I would also like to add that this is just a précis of all the information that we gathered. But I hope it gives you a flavour of where our church stands at the moment. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce David, who spent a lot of time gathering the members' views on Leyland Road Church.
I'd just like to give you a quick summary of our recent church survey, which went out a couple of months ago by post and online. About 70 people responded, which is about 60% of us, which is great. We are an older congregation, average age 66, mostly female, 70% female, with a low level of ethnic diversity. We're predominantly middle-class retired professionals, which means we could probably open a school, run a clinic with a chapel and a shop attached, given the range of skills that we've got. We perceive ourselves as helping, encouraging, giving and serving people with a heart of faith. Some of us see ourselves as teachers and leaders, but few of us are confident with the spiritual gifts such as prophecy and healing. We see our core mission as outreach and evangelism, closely followed by showing the heart of God in our community. We have a great sense of belonging, fellowship, friendship, family, community. Those are the things that hold us together. And we see our key activities as our Sunday worship plus the activities that we do in the community. In terms of our life experiences, in spite of the fact that we're quite an experienced bunch professionally, we recognise ourselves as broken people who are saved by God's grace. When asked about key life experiences, we talked about the experience of faith in the difficulties of life and how we could share that. Things like raising families, poverty, loss, divorce, bereavement, illness, and even abuse. We really value our fellowship groups. About 75% of us are in regular fellowship groups of some kind. About 10% of us aren't, but would like to be. We see our house fellowships as safe places where we care and support each other. We really value the stability of our home groups, but some of us still long for more depth in ministry, worship and study within those home groups. Most of us regularly attend Sunday worship. About 60% of our people come weekly, 20% come bi-weekly. Some of our people can't make it, and I'm very sad about that due to health and other practical reasons. In our Sunday worship, we really value the musical side of it, the preaching, and the fellowship, the coffee. We have a relaxed sense of freedom, and people comment on the fact that they sense the Holy Spirit in our worship. Communion is important to us. We don't really see ourselves as a high or an arty church. We would welcome improvements to make us freer, more family friendly, more contemporary, but some of us still miss traditional worship styles as well. We'd love to hear more from each other in terms of testimony and stories, and we long for more people, and we long for younger people to be amongst us. We could also improve our accessibility in some areas like audio and visual. Interestingly, we don't really want to invite friends and family to our worship, in spite of the fact we're generally positive about it. This is because our worship is inconsistent and we don't know what they're going to find when they come. Preachers can vary, things can be a little bit random, and some of our preaching in recent years has been judgmental and off-putting. Most of us think that we have some focus on outreach, and a third of us think that we're very focused, but some of us also think that we don't have any impact in terms of outreach. We tend to talk about our outreach in terms of activities and not in terms of relationship, and we sometimes focus on our own needs rather than looking outwards. There's a desire for more outreach engagement in the areas, for example, of targeted pastoral care, homeless care, maybe opening the church up, liaising with other services, drop-ins, and perhaps parish nursing, and these are some of the things we can talk through together. So finally, in summary, we're an older, middle-class congregation with lots of professional experience in caring and teaching. In spite of this, we see our personal experiences of family life, loss and struggle as the most valuable experiences that we have to share. We're evangelistic in outlook, and being the heart of God at the heart of our community is seen as our broad mission. We really value our fellowship groups as safe places of support and care. We generally value our Sunday worship, in particular the musical worship, preaching and fellowship after the service. In spite of this, We don't want to invite people to our worship because it's inconsistent and we're not sure what we're bringing them to. We have an outward-looking heart. We value those amongst us who are reaching out in their community activities, and we're proud of what we've achieved in those areas, but we're not always sure how much of an impact we're really making. Thank you very much for taking part of this review, and we welcome your comments and input.
So, now that you've heard from all 4 areas of inquiry, I'd like to draw out some themes. They are what emerged as the review group sought to digest all the material, particularly when there's an air of excitement about them, even a sense that maybe God was speaking. Importantly, these themes in no way mean the conversations are finished, like everything's tied up with a neat bow. But they are important feedback to help the conversations move forward. It's become clear that things cannot continue as they are. Leyland Road, like many churches, including mine, PPW here in Southport, is struggling for resources, people and money. Logically, even in the best of times, it can't be all things to all people trying to do everything. If everything is a priority, then nothing is. It's also biblical to think in terms of encouraging fruitful activity and discontinuing unfruitful. That's John 15. And in any event, it's got to be a healthy thing for any church to ask itself questions like, are we being what we should be and doing the things that we should be doing? Are we in step with what God would have us be and do? The average age of members at Leyland Road is 66, and the demographic of the community is similar. In the community, there is a lot of loneliness, physical and mental health problems, and pockets of poverty. Some other churches have shown elsewhere, including locally, that concentrating on an older age group can cause a church to thrive. Doing so does not, as it turned out, condemn us as a church to have no children and no future. For example, grandparents are very often the prime caretakers, so bring children and more members join as people move into the community. There are many community resources we could link up with in Leyland Road. Still other churches host well-being clinics or similar. Should Leyland Road then prioritise this sort of missional activity? There are some activities that already appear to be fruitful and missional, like those associated with Christians Against Poverty, CAP. Are we, Leyland Road, fully investing in them? What would God have us do with these wonderful opportunities to serve and share his work? There was also a consensus in the review that there is a highly valued sense of community within the church, including mutual support. People think Leyland Road is a good thing. And yet, in something of a contradiction, most people would not bring people they know along. Yes, there were certain practical things that could certainly be done better, for example, on a Sunday morning. But more fundamentally, is Leyland Road a place where people can share deeply, whether from the front or not? Is it a place for the poor in spirit, where all us broken people can have a voice and have community? Do we, the folk of Leyland Road, need to humble ourselves? Is it a fragrant, attractive place really to be and belong? Just come as you are, and for potential new people. And then, just how good is the communication? Not only surface stuff like church notices and being known in the community. What about leadership? Is this done well? Are we really in it together? Are there long-standing hurts as yet unexpressed? Do we still have some hard listening to do to each other? So to conclude, nothing is remotely settled, but the conversations have begun. Simply to do nothing or talk endlessly is to make a decision to perpetuate problems and ultimately close. Instead, what exciting future might God have in store for the people of Leyland Road if they are prepared to do things differently and step out of the boat? And by the way, if you're in another circuit church or even further afield, what might God yet have in mind for you? Do we dare ask?